Hey everyone, I'm back, and much like the rest of the UK, I'm badly in need of a haircut. But anyway, you may remember in my last video, I mentioned something about getting a frame sent to me, which is dear to my heart, and building it up with my spare parts box. Well, a phone call to my dad, a bit of postage later, I have my frame. Now, a few of you tried to guess what frame this was going to be, and there were some actually really good guesses. A few people thought it might be an old Pashley, which I used to have. Some people thought it might be the titanium global frame, which I had and then gave to Danny. But you were all wrong, apart from one person. One of my biggest fans, Vlad, obviously has been watching my vlogs for a while, because a long time ago, I can't remember which vlog it was, I went home and I featured this frame. This is the first ever good bike that I ever had, a 1996 GT Avalanche. I actually got it in 1997, and this is what started my love of riding. My first ever year of competition was on this bike, and yeah, a trials bike it is not. It is an 18-inch frame. When I got it, it was a full bike with really narrow, I think 23-inch wide bars. It had cantilever brakes, triple chainring. It was the most cross-country bike you could get at the time. Anyway, I never threw away this frame. I've had this in my shed for a long time. It's seen better days. To be honest with you, it's not really that dented, it's just cosmetically, it's a little bit rough. I tried to paint some black flames on the front of the head tube, God knows why, it looks awful. I've had stickers on it, there's lots of glue residue left over. So, today I'm going to build this bike up, but first I need to make this frame a little bit prettier. I need to clean it up a little bit. So I've got some Autosol, I've got some paint stripper. I'm going to attack it and see what we can do with it. I'm not going to try and make it perfect, I'm just going to try and make it look a little bit better. And then I'm going to go into my parts box. I've got everything I need to make this into a full bike, and I can't wait to get this thing built. Anyway, that's enough intro. I'm sure you guys want to see this thing built, so let's get straight into it. Right, it is finally done. That actually took way longer than I expected. Got there in the end though, and oh my word, this is bringing back some memories, although this is a way pimper build than I had back then. I was torn between trying to keep it retro and fitting modern stuff, but if I did want to keep this retro, people are charging silly money for this era stuff and it would have cost an absolute fortune. So it's a little bit of mix of both. Although that being said, the only real retro parts in it are the rear rim and the rear brake. Everything else is fairly modern. And it'd be interesting to see how this thing rides with these modern parts on. Although to be fair, it's been so many years since I've ridden this frame, I can't even remember how it rode even with the old parts on. It's going to be a surprise either way. It is pretty surprising just how big this frame is. I got this bike when I was about 13, maybe 14, and yeah, I was a little runt. I wasn't a particularly big 13 or 14-year-old, so riding a bike this big must have been quite the sight. Can't believe I did a year's worth of competitions on this thing. And of course, soon as lockdown has finished, I will be out on this bike and make some proper videos and see what I can do on this thing and try not to kill myself or kill my pride and joy frame. That would be so sad if I ended up breaking it after all these years. I really hope you enjoyed the retro vibe to this video. There really does seem to be a resurgence of old school riders and old school bikes coming out at the minute thanks to lockdown. Everyone's dusting off the bikes stuck at the back of the sheds, and it's really awesome to see that. If you did indeed like the video, hit a like, thumbs up, comment, all that stuff. If you really liked it, give me a subscribe. If you really liked it and you just want to support the channel and see more stuff, more entertainment, more weekly videos for you guys, then please consider hitting me up on Patreon, where you get early release and longer videos. And also consider getting some merch like I am rocking right now. It gives you something cool to wear and it really does help support the channel. Or if you want to help without any obligations, just a one-off thing, then please consider a donation via PayPal. I will link all these things down below in the description. Anyway, have an absolutely fantastic week and I will catch you next time. So take care everyone. Bye bye. too slow. I recently made an engineer's horror video using this old Adamant A2 trials frame. I'm sure people were watching through their fingers as I hacked bits off and drilled holes where I shouldn't. If you fancy a scare, check out that video on the card above and in the description. Well, it's now come time to build it up. Normally I'd start with adding a seat post, but that's impossible with this frame. Is this the first truly seatless bike I've built on camera? Who needs a seat anyway? Not like I'm sitting down when I'm jumping about, is it? Be prepared to get a million "where's your seat?" questions if you decide to get a bike like this though. I'll pin the comment with the best comeback to that question. A box of parts appears. Ideally I'd go all out and use lightweight parts to go with making a frame lighter, but in the end I went with mostly correct era mid-2000s parts, which aren't exactly lightweight but are cool in their own way. Pretty pleased to have found an old Echo headset, and the Echo is a sister brand to Adamant, as the frame has a pretty fat head tube and these cups match it perfectly. It's not just engineers I like to scare, this is for all the bike mechanics out there. By the way, hit me up on Patreon for longer videos released early. I think it's almost time my headset press got its own merch. You can find my merch, like I'm wearing, at Clarkson.com. The fork is an Echo Urban, slightly newer than the frame, but we'll give it a pass. This one has dedicated Magura rim brake mounts. I don't like front rim brakes, but I'm going to try it anyway, because I'm weird. Can always swap to a disc brake later if I want anyway. I found this stem out in the street, so I'll give it a new home. It's a Tratec forged and I think it's 150 by 25 degrees, but it won't tell me. The bike has a high bottom bracket, so this stem will help bring the bars up higher to match it. The fork was used and came pre-cut. Fortunately, a 10mm spacer is all I need for a perfect fit. I think this stem would be perfect, but I'm not keen on the white. Silver would be a much better match. Let's strip it. First I need to clean it to get any of the grease off. Fortunately I still have plenty of paint stripper left from when I stripped the frame. And can you believe it? I'm even using protection this time. Right, coated, now we just wait. I have no idea what paint Tratec used, but it's the toughest paint I've ever seen. That is some seriously strong paint stripper, yet it barely even softened it. Even my kettle was shocked. What I thought would take 15 minutes actually took me over an hour, which is why I couldn't be bothered getting a better finish. Tratec definitely wins the toughest paint award. But I live by the ancient mantra of "that'll do, pig," so despite not quite matching the frame, that'll do, pig indeed. Inspired bars on this style of bike is a bit of an odd choice, but rather than have them in my usual angle, I'm going to tip them forward to get a bit more reach and a higher front end. As always, I check their acoustics to see if they're still safe. These ones check out. Nah then, have I totally ruined the BB shell by drilling through it? Let's attempt to fit the bottom bracket and find out. Let's give it a fighting chance. Lots of lube! This is a mid-2000s Tratec Isis model. Looks like it's been through a lot, but still smooth as silk. Holes? What holes? It fitted as easily as any BB I fitted. Gonna slap on some old Tratec cranks. These are simple, strong cranks, no complaints. If you're new to the world of trials, then you may not know that it's common to run the freewheel system on the cranks. This is a tensile freewheel, which alongside a couple of other brands was one of the first to develop trial specific freewheels. Nice era correct bashing too, either a GU, Adamant, ZAR, but not quite sure which. All matches pretty well, I think. Rear wheel time! So, I have this Trialtech rim, which is nice and wide, no dents, big holes, a good trials rim. But it's white. And you can forget it if you think I'm going to try and strip this after how long that stem took. More white Trialtech paint. This time on the rear hub, which is a screw-on style, as a freewheel mechanism is on the crank instead. Can't be bothered building it, let's do this the easy way. Paint is no good for the rim brake. I'd normally grind the rim after putting the tyre on, but it's getting late and I don't want to annoy the neighbours, so I'll do it now. And again, if you're new to trials and don't know why this is done, it gives high friction in all weather. Using special harder pads, the brake is a lot more powerful. The downside is the brakes become very noisy and rims wear out faster, but it's worth it for the extra power trials needs. Big holes require big rim tape. People often think it's the inner tube they can see, but it's not, so stop asking. This is a fairly rare find, a mid-2000s trial sticky tyre. These were one of the first trial specific 26-inch tyres. And this one is showing its age, although it should be fine for my needs. I must admit, I was never a fan of these rear ones though. They're very heavy and have an overly damped feeling, as I clearly demonstrate. Still going to use it though. Unlike a track bike, there's no lock ring needed for the sprocket, as it's impossible to put any backwards forces through it. I exchanged real human money for this front wheel. This YouTube money is really starting to roll in. I hope Pro 4 onto an older Echo rim, I think. I added a grind on this when I did the rear one. I was tempted to take it apart and strip it silver, but that plan went out the window when Trialtech decided to use bomb shelter grade paint. Separately to the rear tyre, I managed to get a matching front trial tyre too. Cheers, Ross! This one's in much better condition than the rear. Unlike the rear tyre, these were my favourite front tyres for years. Great grip and I liked the damped feeling. It meant my front wheel stayed where I put it, as you can clearly see here. Starting to come together now. What do you think we should call this bike? A simple Trialtech tensioner for, you know, tensioning. And a KMC K610 chain for handling my locomotive-like torque. You've got to watch your baggy pants with this thing. Going for the simplicity of a Magura HS33 brake. The frame is dedicated for these, so it makes sense. I searched for older models but couldn't justify the price when I could just use one of these that the cute thief got me. Speaking of, I haven't seen him around. I wanted to have him in the video again. Psst, 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 psst. I've already cut the hose to length and bled with water for a lighter feel, and yeah, that is a common thing in trials. If I'm going to stop caring about the colour scheme, then I may as well fit these gold Viz clamps, eh? I made my own pads with some new material I found which I think is the best yet. They've been fitted to some Echo alloy backings. Usually, the louder the brake, the better it works, because of science and junk. Does mean no radding at night, otherwise you get some pretty annoyed neighbours. I'm going to see what the fuss is about and fit a matching front HS33. Some Echo clamps will do the job of clamping. These forks take bigger M6 bolts, which is actually a great idea. Bigger bolts are stronger and stiffer and less likely to strip. And these were a good find. Brand new TNN pads. Well liked in the trials world, although I do think mine are better. The CNC backings are definitely brilliant though. The clamps are designed not to use the usual cylinder washer to align the caliper. Instead they clamp directly to the cylinder for extra stiffness. The disadvantage is that if the frame or fork mounts aren't straight, then your pads won't hit flush. Not the end of the world though, they'll soon wear flat. This front wheel needs some work. Disc brakes used to be the common front brake, but then it changed to rim brakes. I used to be with it, but then they changed what it was, and now what I'm with isn't it, and what's it seems weird and scary to me. Remember these? I didn't learn my lessons from my awful attempt at stripping these white Tratec pedals I used on the Crescent build earlier this year. Scabby, but I think they'll suit this bike. Sadly the Crescent has to go back to its owner and is sat in a box awaiting collection. Shame, as I really liked it. Almost wait, has the cute thief been in here all along? Probably trying to steal my ODI grips, the scamp. Caught him just in time. The grips are still here, although they are kind of warm. GT85 works well for grips and smells really nice to boot. Can't guarantee it'll work as a cat deterrent though. Well, shiver me timbers, the bike is finished. It's definitely no lightweight. It'd be interesting to take this out in the streets and see how it fares. I've no idea what the geometry is other than the bottom bracket is plus 60mm. Usually I dislike high bottom brackets, but let's see if the higher stem helps. I'll get a riding video done ASAP. I'll find out how it rides, if I get front HS33 rim brakes, if the rear tyre sucks as much as I remember, and most importantly, see if the frame survives. Drop a comment with your thoughts on it and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Have a great week and I'll catch you next time. See ya! Since moving out of my flat, I've been really struggling to find a nice workshop space to work on my bikes. I need somewhere dry and where I can make a mess if needed. I've been searching everywhere, but I just can't find a big enough space. The motorhome almost worked, but I wanted somewhere with more spiders. Nothing in there except your standard boring motorhome scorpions. Now we're talking. Although there is such thing as too many spiders. No thanks. Last Chance Saloon. And what a flippin' jackpot! Just the right ratio of stains, spiders and space. Also, 0 motorhome scorpions. I'll just make myself at home. Here's my stuff. Some stuff is new, some stuff is old, some stuff was bought, and some stuff was given. Sadly, I no longer get to see the cute thief, so none of this stuff was stolen. No matter how I got it, this is some pretty pimp stuff indeed. The keen-eyed would have seen rim brake parts. Yes, this means it's time for a new mother trucking comp bike. And of course, no comp bike is going to do well without a frame. So feast your eyes on this bad boy, the 2012 Ozonys Cannibal. But why choose an older frame rather than get something more modern? Well, as I've no doubt mentioned in previous videos, I'm not a fan of modern comp bike geometry. Or more precisely, how high the bottom brackets are. That said, I don't want a frame that's too old with the BB scraping on the floor either. This frame is a decent compromise with a BB height of around 40mm, compared with 60mm or higher on modern frames, which I hope will be a much better fit for me. It's also just a nicely designed frame with some features that I really wanted, like horizontal dropouts, split seat tubes for extra stiffness, and importantly for this build, an internal headset, and more on that soon. And also I won't need to break out the Dremel on this frame either. It already has the weight saving work done for me. I was very fortunate to find this used frame in such great condition. Despite how good it was, I did feel it needed to stand out just a little bit more. I got in touch with Vapor Blast Scotland, based in Grangemouth, and they provided this seriously nice ceramic coating. I've added their web link in the description. They're a great team and I can highly recommend them for any metal prep and coating jobs you have. I then added my signature Huckett frame protection and I think it looks amazing. I even added my stickers to the CNC cutouts too. A total pain in the ass to do, but totally worth it. All in all, I'm stoked with how this frame came out. I can't wait to get it built. So let's not delay, time to get the headset fitted and I'll explain why I particularly needed an internal version. The truth is, I never like to do things the normal way, so I'm going to fit this Hope external cup just to be difficult. Unfortunately, I left my block of my headset tool at home, so I'll have to improvise. But if it's stupid and it works, then you got really lucky. Let's try my luck some more. There must be a few horseshoes in this garage. I can't believe that worked. So, the elephant in the room. Why am I fitting an external cup to an internal frame? I'm sure a few of you know why this Hope cup is special, but for everyone else, it's designed to allow you to fit a tapered fork in a frame made for straight steerers. Handy, as Kruger sent me their 26-inch carbon disc fork, which has a tapered steerer and wouldn't have fit this frame otherwise. This fork is perfect for this build. Strong, stiff and lightweight. Also comes with a dismount, the lightest Charles disc fork available at the minute. I opted for 9mm open dropouts to allow me to pick more hub options, but they also do a through-axle version for extra stiffness too. So there we go, a tapered fork in a non-tapered frame. What a time we live in. Though a word of warning, this isn't guaranteed to work on every internal headset style head tube. If it curves in too much, it can clash. This frame is pretty close, but it clears just fine. Conveniently, the steerer is the perfect length without cutting, and there's an inbuilt star nut, so no faffing there either. Nice one, Krukers. If you're one of the cool ones, you'll have been watching my videos and seen this stem at least twice before on previous builds. It will have its own channel soon. You know the drill, a Comus 140mm by 20 degree. With all the bolts swapped for my favourite element, atomic number 22. I add a 10mm spacer, and then the stem. I thought this stem was too low on higher BB frames, but it could be a good fit for this one. I have a solution if not. Weight saving is always fun, so here's the lightest top cap I could find. Made from fibres of atomic element number 6, which, conveniently, is also how much it weighs. Inspired bars on a comp bike? It's quite possible I've gone completely mad. There are lighter carbon trials bars, so why these heavier ones? Well, I simply like the shape. I've used these bars for years and years, and they're what I'm used to. As much as I want to save weight, I also want to feel comfortable, and these bars will help with that. Plus, they allow me to fine-tune how my bike feels. Roll them back for a shorter, higher, streety feel, or tilt them forwards for a stretched out comp bike feel. Plus, they're not really that heavy. This is quite a nice neighbourhood, but I still need to do the bar test, as is tradition. Okay, less getting a bad reputation and more bike building. This definitely isn't your normal comp bike. Though maybe this will help. Looks mean already. I was tempted to do the bottom bracket next, but as my pappy used to quote me, if you've got a frog to eat, don't spend too long looking at it. And I've got a big old frog staring at me regarding the back wheel. Though the good news is, the wheel is already built, so we're not quite dealing with a bullfrog. However, the building part wasn't the worry. This is the same wheel that was on my Ashton and Echo, a selection of Tratec parts which I know are great. Being sponsored by Light Bicycle, who make carbon rims, it's a shame I can't run a rim brake on them, so I added some carbon wrap on this one to at least pretend I can. And check out the colour-coded nipples. Man, that would sound weird out of context. As usual, if you're new to trials, you may notice the texture on my rim. This is done with an angle grinder to give the pad something to bite onto and give more power. Despite the frame having horizontal dropouts, you still need a method to tensioning the chain. In this case, borrowing an idea from motorbikes and using snail cams. These slide over the hub axle and push against the bolt in the frame, which then pushes the wheel back. They're also helpful for hypnotizing people. You will hit that subscribe button. You will hit the thumbs up. You will head to addyclarkson.com and buy some merch. And back in the room. I didn't stop at the colour-coded nipples. Some orange bolt washers are a nice touch. All pretty easy so far. Slide on a couple of snail cams, thread 2 bolts in. Why all the previous frog talk? Well, what if I told you I'm going to try tubeless? On a comp bike? Inconceivable, I know. To those who have no idea why this is a big deal, then listen up. Comp riders still use inner tubes. Pretty nuts when they run such low pressures and are hitting sharp edges all the time. Punctures are very common. A couple of riders have tried tubeless with mixed results, but most trials rims are single walled and have a lot of weight saving cutouts, which makes seating the tyre and seating it a lot harder. With this rim being double walled and no cutouts, it should be a lot easier to make it tubeless. I've never tried it with a rim this wide before, and I only have a track pump, so I really don't know how well this is going to go. To try and help create a tighter fit, I'm going to add extra tape. This will also help seal the rim join. I'm also adding a couple of extra layers over the valve hole. I'll explain why later. But first, big thanks to Rimpact for helping me protect my rims on all my bikes. If you're going tubeless, then these are ideal. They get extra thanks for this set though. For a rim this wide, 48mm if you're interested, a standard width insert isn't quite wide enough to either protect the rim or support the tyre sidewall. Rimpact were awesome enough to cut down one of their 650B plus size inserts down to 26 inch for me. And it's a perfect size. They also supply their own valves which are designed to be compatible with inserts, because not all valves are. The only issue is these valves are Presta and the rim is Schrader. But that's where this extra tape comes in. It should stop the valve from pushing through the bigger hole. Pressed valves are sharp enough just to push through. This makes the hole only as big as it needs to be. Fitting the valve now can make fitting the tyre harder, but I find I can get a better seal as I can push harder while tightening the lock nut. Speaking of tyres, I'm spoiled for choice with a massive 2 to choose from. I've previously used and loved this Jitsi model. It's a good size, decent weight and is very grippy. I'd be happy to use it again. But I'm a sucker for experimenting and couldn't refuse trying the lightest trials tyre I could find. One from V Tyre Co. I mean, if I'm not going to get snake bites, I can afford to use the lighter tyre, right? The only thing that puts me off is the compound feels harder, so maybe grip isn't as good. But then again, Jack Carthy uses it, so it can't be all bad. Now, it's been a while since I tried a bit of tyre fitting trickery. It partly worked. I expected it to be fully inflated though. Like it'd go that easily for me. Fortunately, fitting the rim pack inserts is pretty easy. But what about the other tyre bead? I can normally fit the tyres easy enough by hand with these inserts, but I've no idea how tight this tyre is. The trick is to lift the tyre in insert and then push the bead under the insert and into the rim's central channel. Turns out with the extra tape, this tyre is a very tight fit, and this is as far as I could get. I had to resort to a tyre lever. The shame. The good thing with these inserts is, even if you do get a puncture, you could still ride with a flat tyre. Before I put any sealant in, I want to see if I can actually inflate it without it. Well, shiver me timbers, it's inflating! No popping beads though, that's usually the sign it's seated well. I'll just have to hope it is. I can hear some air escaping from the bead. I'll add some sealant and hope it either acts as a lube to help pop the bead into place or seal any imperfections if it's just not a great fit. I've had good results with Continental sealants, but also with Stans and Joes. Still a bit of air escaping, which is a concern, but I'll give it a shake and leave it on its side for a while and see if that fixes it. Oh joy, now I get to repeat the process with the front wheel. Although being a genuine light bicycle carbon rim, I know these set up pretty easily. The hub is an Echo TR, which is practically made from atomic number 2, and of course some matching orange bolt washers. Just like the rear wheel, I'm showing off with my tyre selection. Do I go for a front Jitsi, which like the rear version performed really well? Or do I go for the completely unknown Michelin Pilot Slope? I'm going to try the Michelin, purely because I like the funky tread pattern. It's also light, but will it be grippy? Only a single layer of tape needed this time. Fitting of the tyre and insert was smooth. I was tempted not to use an insert to save weight, but I'm playing it safe. I don't want to regret it when doing big gaps to front. Much easier. I spoke too soon. I was suspicious of how easily that went. Turns out the wheel was biding its time and had something up its sleeve. The axle doesn't fit the dropouts. The axle is to blame rather than the fork. For some reason, Echo use a 10mm axle when most forks have 9mm dropouts. Nothing a file can't fix though. A rather neat job if I do say so myself. Fits like a 9mm axle glove. I'm obviously not using a rim brake with this wheel. 26-inch wheeled comp bikes all tend to use front rim brakes for extra bite, weight saving and more accurate feel. But I'm more of a disc brake fan, mainly because I hate not being able to slow down without sounding like a banshee. I got this rotor thinking it would be a nice match to the frame, but on inspection it's a different enough orange to make me question it. I then saw this one on eBay, which I think looks cool. I've no idea what the brand is, but I like it enough to try it out. I wonder if my rear tyre's still inflated. I'm equally shocked and delighted. Another hurdle though, the wheel won't slide all the way in. Might be too much paint, so I removed some with a file. While I have the file, nice rhyme, I'm going to try and level my brake mounts. Like usual, I'll explain why soon. I just like teasing you. The wheel now fits perfectly. I love how tight fitting everything is. Time to fit the BB. I spent all my YouTube earnings on this Jitsi titanium one. Apparently it takes a lot of effort to mine and refine titanium into stuff. With a width of only 123mm, I think they must have run out of it. This is possibly a little too narrow, but we'll see. I found these Tratec cranks in a drawer in this garage, which is pretty handy. Excellent cranks, but not the biggest Q factor, and that's how wide they are at the pedal threads, which combined with the narrow BB could be a really tight fit on the brake calipers. Again, if you're new to comp trials, they don't use a standard mountain bike drivetrain. They have a fixed rear sprocket and a freewheel threaded to the cranks. And this is the freewheel I'm using, a trial specific Echo titanium model. Maybe they used the missing titanium from the bottom bracket to make this. 108 engagement points with powerful springs makes this excellent for trials, and the titanium centre makes it the lightest freewheel can get, if you can find one that is. It's 18 tooth to match the 15 on the rear, which is a pretty standard ratio for 26-inch wheeled comp bikes. It has a lot of drag though due to the strong springs, so don't get one if you want a fast rolling bike. Yet more titanium courtesy of this Tratec bash guard. Not the strongest, but it will take a few hits and weighs very little. To fit, I simply slide it on before the freewheel. Be really careful if you're fitting your own freewheel. The threads are quite fine and it's easy to ruin them by not lining up straight. I usually turn the freewheel backwards first until it drops into place and then turn it the correct way. Sometimes the threads can be a tight fit, so if you're 100% sure it's straight, you can use a rag to get a better grip. Before you get to the end of the thread, it's worth positioning the bash to the correct place. This style is only held in position by the tightening of the freewheel, and once it's tight, it isn't an easy job to move it again. As I ride the bike, the freewheel will tighten up another quarter turn at least and rotate the bash at the same time. So I need to predict this and position the bash so it will end up in the right place once everything's fully tight. Chain time. Some comp riders use the scariest drilled out lightweight chains available, but I wouldn't dare, so it's a stronger, heavier KMC Z1EHX for me. Snapping chains can be extremely dangerous, and using cogs this small puts a huge leverage on a chain, so I don't like to take any chances. I'd rather have a slightly heavier chain and a bit more reliability. And this is how the snail cams work. Drive side to tighten the chain, non-drive side to center the wheel. Then tighten the axle to lock everything in place. Pretty simple. With the freewheel on the crank, the chain is constantly moving, which looks weird but in a really cool way. Like I mentioned earlier, the narrow BB and short Q factor of these cranks doesn't leave much room for the brake calipers. I'm building a brake from parts, and I think I have a solution though. I'm going to use some Echo calipers, which are shorter than Magura versions, which should give me the room I need. Echo also be my clamps of choice. This TR model is simple and light, and it's also the reason I filed my brake mounts level. They also fit this carbon Tratec booster without needing long spacers, which makes things neat and even stiffer. I mentioned I was making the brake from parts, so here's what I'll be using. Like I mentioned, the brake calipers from this Echo TR brake. I'm not using the levers, as these can leak, but the calipers are reasonably reliable. So instead, I'm going to use a Tratec Sport lever. It has a forged body with well thought out bleed port, a smaller piston for more power, and is known to be reliable. Perfect. And smartly, they have a solid back to the blade to avoid cutting your knuckles in extreme moves. Sticking with Tratec, they also provided me with some clear hosing, pretty handy for seeing any air bubbles. And a hose splitter. This doesn't change the brake's power or feel, but can make the routing neater. It's pretty cool, so I had to have one, and that's the way my brain works. Traditionally, Magura brake clamps rely on a ball socket design with a plastic washer around the cylinder. The advantage being you can adjust the angle of your caliper if the frame needs it. The disadvantage is that those extra parts can wear or deform and make the brake shift position or impossible to adjust. This Echo clamp style does away with the ball socket design and simply clamps directly to the cylinder. But because there's no angle adjustment, you're relying on the frame being totally straight for the pads hitting flat against the rim. Filing the brake mounts flat earlier helps make everything line up a lot straighter. Another frog quote: "If you have two frogs to eat, then eat the big one first." Making the rear wheel tubeless was the big frog, but building and bleeding this brake was the second frog, and it's not much smaller. I have to press in 6 barbed fittings to the hose, so I bought this tool to help. It worked great on the first couple, but I struggled with the rest of them. I eventually got them all fitted, even if they don't all look super neat, but now it's time to bleed the brake with some Tratec fluid. It's possible it's radioactive, but it's also really thin and makes the brakes extremely responsive. Other than the dodgy hose fittings, which did take my full weight with pulling on them, so it should be safe, the bleed went easily. That frog got munched. I'll be using some brake pads I made myself, made from polyurethane, which has a much higher abrasive resistance and high friction, perfect for a rim grind. Feels great, and the cranks clear nicely. Result! With the back brake fitted, let's do the front. I'm just thankful I don't have to make this from scratch. I'm going for a Magura MT6, but I am concerned that a 180mm rotor might not be powerful enough, so don't be surprised if I end up with an MT7 on in the future. This brake was a tadpole, fitted with no drama other than a slight bend in the rotor. But I easily got that fixed. Just the contact points left now, and how perfect are these ODI long neck grips. I've had these for ages, waiting for the perfect orange bike to fit them to. I knew hoarding was worth it. I used just a little bit of disc brake cleaner to slide them on. And Bob's your fake orange tanned uncle. And lastly, my standing rectangles. These are my last bit of bling, some titanium axled Echo caged guys. They almost feel fake at 244 grams for the pair. Here's hoping they're going to be strong enough. And we're done. Et voila! Your dinner's ready. And what a result! I wanted a unique bike, and that's exactly what I got. Amazingly, the rear tyre is still inflated, and I hope it stays that way. You're probably curious of the weight. It definitely feels like the lightest comp bike I've had, but without a front rim brake, carbon bars, light chain, or even lightweight tubes rather than inserts and sealant, it's never going to be as light as a purebred comp bike. I don't have a scale, so I'm estimating low to mid 8 kilograms. I'll confirm in the description when I get to weigh it. So, how does it feel? It feels flipping awesome. Brakes need bedding in, but I'm excited to get riding it and entering some comps. Hopefully this is a bike I can actually get on with. Huge thanks to Tarty Bikes, Krukers, Vapor Blast Scotland, Light Bicycle, Tratec, Huckit and Rimpact for the help with this build. Let me know what you think of it in the comments and I'll make a video riding it ASAP. Thanks for watching, have a great week and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. I've been working Acute Thief hard this last year, but I think it's time for another bike build. And his back is turned. I guess he is due a rest. Looks like I'm on my own this week. Now I've quite enjoyed putting my bike to the test by entering them into trials competitions, despite them not really being best suited for that. The one bike that I did build for comps worked great, but I fancy a bit of an experiment with brake setup. But first, I need to explain the strange world of trials braking preferences. Stick with me here. I usually run a rear rim brake and front disc on my comp bikes. The advantage of a rim brake is that by locking the wheel at the outermost part, you get the most precise control, because there's no movement from the pads or the spokes. Whereas locking the wheel from the centre gives some movement at the outside of the wheel, which can be off-putting. The only reason I like a front disc is for quieter braking, as rim brakes on trials bike can be very loud. On 20-inch competition bikes, it's now quite common to see the opposite brake combo used. A front rim brake has a huge advantage for a move called a hook, where you hook the front wheel over an edge with the bike vertically and spring up to the object as it reduces a lot of unwanted flex. And then a disc at the rear gives quiet braking with some modulation. There's much less spoke flex on these small wheels, so running a rear disc isn't as much as an issue. I'm glossing over a ton of other pros and cons for each brake type, but hopefully you get a bit of an idea. I fancy trying the 20-inch brake style on 26-inch, but my bike doesn't have a disc mount, so I'll have to build something new. What a shame. Because the Acute Thief is having a holiday, I have to find my own parts. I'm lazy, so I'm just going to use what I had within reach. Fortunately, I'm a bit of a hoarder, so shouldn't have too much issue. Now here's something quite interesting. My old Ozonys XR26 frame I had in the late 2000s. This wasn't a comp frame, but I used it as one. To try and get my bike as light as possible, I actually modified the frame substantially. This is what inspired my Drillium bike build I did a while back. Amazingly, with all these modifications and a lot of abuse from years of riding, it never broke. The only bad thing is this frame actually came with a rear disc mount, which would have been perfect, but I cut it off. Fortunately, I just so happened to have another one in good condition with no parts chopped off. Now this gives you a better idea of the effort I put in to save weight. But I'm curious, how much weight did I actually save? Only 20 grams. To be fair, there's probably half a kilo of body filler and paint smoothing the dents. It didn't have an easy life. But anyway, that's a history lesson done. Let's make use of this other one and its disc mount. I've chosen some parts. Let's show you what I've got. Unlike Thor, I go for the head set first. These were in my old frame, so it's nice they're reliving the good times again. And speaking of good times, the headset fitting 2x2 hasn't had any action for a while and is definitely having a good time today. Lock up your headsets, it's hungry for more. Remember the fork from my Ashton build? Well, this isn't it. Well, it is, but it's not.
It's the same giant trials fork model, but not the one I previously had. It's seen better days, but these are strong, not too heavy, but most importantly has V-brake mounts, a rare thing on trials forks these days. I may have stolen my own stem from my comp bike. Thieving from myself, the cute thief won't let me live this one down. But the length and angle was too much to resist. I've got some of this fashionable black stuff as a top cap, a lovely bit of weight saving, or it would be if I didn't use this heavy steel bolt. I then found a Trialtech bar which is also made of the black fashionable stuff. It's not as high as a modern comp bar, but it suits the era of the frame, so should be a good match. To try and fit in with the modern world, I'm going to ditch my usual rolled back street style bar position and instead roll them forward like the cool comp kids do. I've tried this before and I found it as pleasant as standing nude in a swarm of Scottish midges. But I'll make you a deal, if they sound good then I'll stick with them tilted for a little while at least. Well, that settles that then. I might end up regretting this. You may have seen this front round before. It's the same actual exact one I had on my Ashton. And there's a Trialtech Carthy rim onto Trialtech hub. Much like the fork, this does have a disc mount which I won't be using, and instead has a roughened rim surface which I will be. By running an angle grinder over the braking surface, I create an aggressive texture which combined with specific pads increases brake bite, hold and wet weather performance, at the sacrifice of modulation and quietness. Now my contact with 90% air and 10% floor will be a Jitsi reverse front tyre. These are unique in the cycling world as they're probably the softest compound, lightweight 2-inch tyre available. And as you can see, this has had plenty of use, but I think there's still some life left in it yet. No tubeless this time though, so I'm resorting to some ancient technology. Fingers crossed this works. Oh hey, that worked a treat. Fully inflated too. But much like the rim texture, it's a little aggressive. I'm sure this fork will tame it though. And yes, the wheel is on the wrong way, but with how I'm using it, there really isn't a right or wrong way, so I did this just to freak out a few people. Moving backwards, things aren't as easy as I have to build a wheel specifically for this bike. But that gives me the chance to build something pretty pimp with this Chris King single speed hub I found in a cobweb and this Light Bicycle Carbon 26 plus size rim I found nicely wrapped in a box from Light Bicycle. Being a plus sized rim, it's wider than usual at 45mm outer and 40 inner. Here I have a trial specific rear rim and the width is almost exactly the same, which means a Light Bicycle one would be perfect for the rear of this bike. It should also be stiffer, as trials rims are often single walled with large cutouts to save weight, which isn't as stiff as a doubled walled version like the Light Bicycle. Trial specific rims can often bite too, so be careful. The other advantage is I can go tubeless a lot easier too and avoid pinch punches which are common in trials. I build the wheel like Edgar Wright is watching. And there we have it, a nice wide, stiff and light wheel with no zombies, cults or aliens to be seen. Although I do fancy a cornetto. Next, a bit of bondage, ask your parents. And a valve, ask your parents. And we're tubeless ready. Ask your parents. I then rediscovered this custom rim packed insert they made for me for a previous bike, which is a 27.5 plus sized insert cut down to fit 26 inch. It needs to be a wider plus version so it still protects the rim, as a normal insert just wouldn't do much. I'm not using a trial specific rubber on the rear, but instead I'm going for something I know grips well, a Maxxis Minion. I didn't have a rear model, so a front will have to do. The tread pattern is great for mountain bike, but I'm going to modify it later to work a little better for trials. But the rubber compound is good and it's not too heavy, so should be a good choice of tyre. This combo was a bit of a tight fit, so after some fighting and a rare resort of a tyre lever, I did eventually get it all fitted. After seating the beads, I feed it some full fat wheel milk, re-inflate, and we're good to go. Well, almost good to go. Time to modify the tread like I mentioned. I'm going to do this by removing some of the shoulder knobs. These are great for cornering, but I won't really be doing much of that. By removing every second one, I'll create a bigger gap which is more likely to let the tyre catch on the edge of an object. Imagine it like teeth on a cog. The fewer the teeth, the more aggressive the hold when it grips something. The other advantage is a weight saving. These bits of rubber add up to almost 50 grams. You can get specific tools to trim tyre treads, but I find soapy water solution and a fresh blade in a box cutter style knife works well too. Just be careful and replace the blade often. It's surprising how quickly they blunt, and a blunt knife is when you usually cut yourself. This took roughly 20 minutes to do, and this is the end result. A nice pile of rubber to add to my collection. Oh yeah, and a pretty cool looking tyre. Once all that is done, it's time to completely finish the wheel with a 15-tooth sprocket and a 203mm Hayes rotor. The only issue is, much like the dirt jump build I did recently, I'm trying to fit a 12mm hub onto a 9mm frame. To fix this, I'm using the same reverse components axle converter I used on the dirt jump bike, as, for reasons I'll explain in a future video, I ended up changing to a different system which works better for that bike. But because this bike has a much simpler vertical dropout, this converter should be perfect for this. It's starting to take shape now. Let's fit an arse bearing. I shouldn't really call it an arse, as this Tratec model is actually pretty good. Strong and light, which is always a good cooker combo. I found these Tratec cranks chilling out back. They're fairly basic, but so am I, so I think we'll get on great. They already have an 18-tooth sprocket fitted to match the rear 15, plus a right foot forward bash guard, which is perfect for my right-footedness. Now I probably should just call this the Tratec bike build, as I add yet another one of their products. This time, a chain tensionomatic. And if you've seen my builds, you'll know I like the KMC K610 chainomatic, so no surprises here. The good thing with this tensioner is that it locks into place and doesn't flap about, causing a racket like other models. That'll do, pig. That'll do. And now on to the reason why I'm building this bike in the first place. The brakes. The rear disc is a Hayes A2. I've had great experiences with the A4 model, but sometimes a 2-piston brake can actually give more bite, which is ideal for trials, so I'm going to try this out. I often get bad arm pump riding trials comps, so I'm curious to know how I get on with the super light lever feel these have. I'm hoping it will be a big help. I do like how the caliper and frame colours match. Now, like I alluded with the V-brake mounts on the fork, I'm not using a hydraulic rim brake like most trials bikes have, and instead I'm going for the simplicity, power and mainly nicer feel of a nice old V-brake. In this case, a very nice Avid Ultimate. The sealed bearings reduce any play in the arms and they're very stiff for extra power. And I love how much easier V-brakes are to set up over a hydraulic rim brake. Plus, I can adjust the spring tension to be very light, making them less fatiguing to pull, reducing my arm pump. You can't do that on a hydraulic rim brake. Like I mentioned earlier, talking about needing special pads for the aggressive rim texture, these are some I made myself. It's a harder rubber with great abrasion resistance and they work really well. And again, this is another advantage of a V-brake, you physically bolt the pads in, so there's no rattling or uneven pad wear like you get with clip-in pads on hydraulic alternatives. I'll be pairing the caliper with an Avid SD7 lever. I actually prefer these over the Ultimate levers, plus they're pretty cheap, which is a bonus. You can also adjust the power and lever firmness with the red dial on top. And that's another thing you can't do with a hydraulic rim brake. The only real disadvantage of a V-brake is the cable, where it's more open to the elements and needs smoother lines to feel good. It's important to get something that doesn't compress to retain a solid lever feel, and I'm going to use this alligator one for that very reason. Because it's made from aluminium segments, it can't compress, but also because it doesn't contain any steel, it's also lightweight. I'm hoping this should make for a solid lever feel. Now, do you recognise these? They're from my Adamant Drillium build and look like crap. They work better than they look though, so on they go. And lastly, but not least, some bar gloves. And in general, thin ones work well for trials, and these ODI Gwyn models are the thinnest I have, so on they go too. And for a bit of nostalgia, I reused my original Tight Bikes chainstay protector I had on my old Ozonys. I get things lined up and tight, then give it away. No, not give it away, I mean give it away. Place your guesses in the description. Exactly 10 kilos. How close were you? That's pretty much the same weight as my Hex, which is quite interesting. Well, to me at least. So, as you can see, the front wheel is rock solid with a rim brake, but surprisingly, the rear wheel isn't actually much worse. There's still some disadvantage to a rear disc, i.e. it's heavier and easier to damage, but maybe spoke flex isn't as much as an issue as I thought. Only one way to find out though. First impression is how weird it is to have a silent brake on this type of bike. Second impression is I really like the lack of noise. Third impression is that a stiffer front end with a rim brake actually makes front hops harder. There is some noise and some slight pad knocking in the rear brake, but that often goes after a week of riding or can be reduced with some tape on the back of the pads. But I'm impressed with the power and feel of it. Overall, I'm pleased with the build, with it just being parts I had lying around. I think it's a nice looking bike, and first impressions are good. Now the cute thief was out sunbathing, so I asked him what he thought. Yeah, well, he's hard to please, but I'm stoked. I can't wait to put this bike to the test, and speaking of, I'm entering a competition on this in 2 days, so I'll soon find out what I think of this braking combo. I'll experiment with forward rolled bars too, maybe even go more extreme than this. It'll be interesting to see what I think of this frame too. It's been 14 years since I last rode one, and I loved it back then. Will I still like it? You know when I open a video with rain, there's only one thing coming. Yep, let's build another bike. Being honest, I didn't plan on building a bike so soon after finishing my gravel bike, but I found out the last round of the UK Nationals was a week away and at one of my favourite places, Shipley Glen. Comp bikes are like cheap razors. They're disposable one-use items, so that means I have to build something new. I enlisted the cute thief to bring me all the parts needed to build something interesting, but these days he insists on payment up front for some reason. Maybe my northern cheapness has displeased him before. He drives a hard bargain. I only wanted to give him one Dreamy, but 2 Dreamies was apparently enough for him to crap out a frame. Is this where they come from? Now he's away to do whatever he does during the day, let's take a look at his produce. This is a Giant Trials Team Mark III. I built a Mark I version during the first COVID lockdown, and unlike that frame, this barely has a straight tube in sight. The history books might tell you I'm not a huge fan of curvy frames. I like things straight and to the point, no messing about, no faffing. But for some reason, this frame has grown on me. Maybe curves can be sexy. The sexy down tube is in good condition, with no dents or scrapes, so that's usually a good indicator it's not had a hard life and should be nice and strong. Giant are excellent frame makers, and this has some nice details like the built-in gusset and nice one-piece chainstay yoke. It can also be run with or without a seat. I wonder what the cute guys provided. Overall, it's a nice frame with slightly updated geo compared with the Mark I. The only thing I don't like is the paint, which just like me is a little rough around the edges. I'm stuck in my ways, but let's see if we can change the frame and maybe improve it a little. First thing is to remove the decals, which luckily are quite happy to be peeled off. To help strip it nude, I use some acetone as it's a strong aphrodisiac to bikes. This will get rid of any sticker residue and grease and put the frame in the right mood. It's just like giving your partner a sensual massage. Though be careful using such a strong aphrodisiac on your bike if you're not wanting to take things further. It's powerful enough to remove layers on its own and can ruin a good relationship, frame. Now the mood's been set, it's time to don some protection. As with my personal relationships, I find a dustpan is always a handy accessory too. A little strip tease from some Starchum Sim Strip is all that's needed now for the frame to get into its birthday suit. I think I might have been pushing my luck a bit. The paint is coming off, but it's not peeling off like a decent paint job. It's more like it's melting. Instead of being able to wipe it clean, I'm just smearing the paint around, and that's not something I'm into. It's annoying, but not the end of the world. I just need to put a little more elbow oil into it than I expected. Sometime later, this is the end result. Pretty sexy, huh? Now you're probably wondering what colour I'll be painting it, but there's also a good chance you saw the video title and thumbnail, so I've had a strong clue that I'm not painting it at all. In previous videos where I've wooed the paint off frames, I've had a lot of comments suggesting I should leave it raw or polish it. I think that's actually a great idea. I'm a fan of polishing things, so let's see how shiny I can make it. If If you're wanting a nice brushed finish, you can use WD-40 and a rundown flat in Govan Hill to get a pretty decent result. Doing this gives me a uniform finishing before polishing. To be fair, keeping it like this will look nice, but I don't think this has been stressful enough, so let's make things a whole lot harder and add some shine. A wild Autosol metal polish tube arrives. I feel like a hand finish will give best results, starting with something coarse and working down to something soft. Despite spending lots of my time polishing when I was younger, especially in my teens, I'm no expert, so this is partly experimental. Then I remembered I'm a lazy git and broke out the power tools. If a 10,000 RPM buffing wheel can't make it shine, then I don't know what to believe anymore. I realise an angle grinder isn't perhaps the best tool, but shiver me timbers, it did a pretty decent job. It's not perfect, but hey, it's me. I'm not Mr. Perfection. And bear in mind, I literally have 2 days to build this, so I can't spend too long on one thing. It's decent enough though, and looks way shinier in person. The difficulty now is keeping it clean. This picks up dirt and fingerprints like nothing else. So with the frame ready, let's see what fork I have. Well, a bit predictable perhaps, a giant Trials Team fork. The cute thief must have found a good supply, as I've used this model of fork on a few builds now. They're not the lightest, but are strong and have multiple brake options, which is always handy. Of course, just like the frame, I've got to work my magic and swap the grey for polished. Before I polish it, I had a sneak peek at what brakes I'll be using, and spoiler alert, it's not a disc brake. Because I'm a glutton for punishment, I've decided to go a bit mental and lob off the disc mount. Nothing quite like making something just a little less practical, huh? With the mount removed, I spend more time than I should have to get the leg looking factory fresh. But I think it was worth it. You can hopefully barely tell which side had the mount on. I then spent more time polishing it up and it matches the frame nicely. Again, I'm so stoked on how well the disc mount removal went. Gonna fit the headset next, but if I've spent time polishing the frame and fork, why not go the whole hog and polish everything? This means I need to turn these cups silver. To do this, I'm going to use a little magic, but mainly some sodium hydroxide, otherwise known as caustic soda. To show there's no trickery going on, I'm in short sleeves and no gloves. I don't want you thinking I've got some silver cups hidden away, do I? But the real magic is that I do this and still have my skin left at the end. My brother has a PhD in chemistry and told me how dangerous sodium hydroxide is and how much protection he uses when he handles it. My lovely assistant Jane also had an ambulance called recently when an explosive reaction caused a bunch to go in her face, including mouth and eyes. It's nasty stuff, so don't do what I'm doing. Now that I've told you not to do this, this is how you do it. Some hot water, a little sodium hydroxide and some clean alloy parts. Drop them in and watch the reaction go. Sodium hydroxide dissolves aluminium, and what we're doing here is just dissolving the top few micron layers which have been stained from the anodizing. The hotter the water, the stronger the reaction. Just don't leave them in for too long, otherwise you won't have any parts left. Often they'll come out dark and just need a little hand finishing to get them looking good. But yeah, jokes aside, take care of using chemicals. Not just from the risk of melting your skin off, but also from the fumes. The gas produced is hydrogen, which isn't necessarily toxic, but if you do this in an enclosed space, it can cause suffocation, which again, isn't something I'm into. But if care is taken, anodized parts will magically become silver. To continue my sketchiness, I'm resorting back to my headset thwacker after my disappointment trying to install headsets in a more sophisticated way last week. It looks like it's been chewed on by a wolf, but that just makes it more ergonomic. That one's for you, Ross. Thinking of you. Okay, so that's looking cool. Before I fit the fork, let me show you my shiny stem. It's a posh Thomson Elite X2, which is their road model, but happens to be a perfect 120 by 17 degrees size. As you can probably tell, this has had a strip and a polish too. Of course, I also stripped and polished the spacer, to the best of my abilities, with it being textured, and top cap. This is either going to look really cool or really crap, but so far I'm not hating it, although there is a little regret kicking in for the amount of work I know I'll need to do to polish all the other parts. Right, well, let's crack on. Handle tube is a Triac alloy model, and with most Trials handle tubes, it has more sweep than a janitor visiting a broom conference, due to being running tilted more forwards than usual for better positioning when on the rear wheel. It's not sounding great though. Maybe that's because it's the wrong colour. Give me a moment. There we go, nicely polished, perfect for my dirty hands to leave fingerprints all over it. But how does it sound now? Much better. Although I don't think I cleaned off all the paint stripper, and I think I just stripped my lips off. But no time for self-pity. We're not even halfway through the video yet, so we need to get a move on. Okay, next up some rounds, and the rear hub is a Hope Pro 2. Not the lightest or the most engaging, but it's a workhorse, and most importantly, it's already silver. Okay, so it's not polished, but I'll give it a pass, as I'm still a lazy git, and I can't be bothered to take it apart and get into its nooks and crannies. Soon to be joining the hub is another workhorse, a fairly retro Alex DX32. These were a popular wide round in the 2000s, so should suit the frame well, as it can't fit modern super wide rounds. At 38mm wide, with double walled construct and steel eyelets, it's a bit podgy. I'm going to do something I haven't done in years, but was common practice back in the day. And that's to drill the fudge out of it. I've gone for a 20mm hole saw, which seems like a good compromise. After some time and a lot of mess, I'm left with a pretty cool looking round. After some time deburring, I used some sodium hydroxide to turn the rim silver, and then spent some more time getting it polished up. Turns out rims with eyelets are a little hard to polish, but I'm pleased with how it's looking. I then attach some wires and it's good to go. Well, almost. With holes this size, I need to make sure the tube won't come out, so a wide rim tape is needed. I decided to make my own out of some parcel tape, and to fit the theme, I made the other side shiny with some aluminium tape. I had no idea if this would work, but so far it has, and it couldn't be more perfect. The rear tyre is a beast, a Continental Der Kaiser. I've never felt a tyre as grippy or stable as this. It was always my preferred tyre when I did comps, as you could gap to any random shape and it would just stick to it and not fold or bounce off. The downside was that to be that stable meant it had super stiff sidewalls, which were not only heavy, but reduced the spring, making gaps and other bouncy moves feel a bit damped. To me, the pros outweighed the cons, and I loved the predictability it had when riding natural. No magic tricks fitting this though, it was a bit of a brute. No tubeless either. One credit to such thick sidewalls is that it has a lot of puncture protection. Now I'd be surprised if I pinched it. Tubeless is cool, but it's also a faff, especially with drilled room like this, so fitting a tube is a nice easy change of pace. It's a bit of a squeeze, but it does just fit. This isn't a unicycle, so let's turn it into a double unicycle. I wish there was a word for that. And make a front round. I'll be using this. It's a Mavic 721, which, if you're in your 30s, probably doesn't need any introduction. This seems like it's had a previous life on a trials bike already, as the braking surface is already ground. What it isn't though is silver, so you know the drill. Actually, speaking of drills, it's not just my rear rim that's getting a drilling. Quiet. I'm a drill addict, and I have at it with the front rim too. I start small and eventually work my way up to 10mm. Not huge holes, but enough to save some weight and still retain some strength. After some deburring, stripping and polishing, this is what I end up with. Pretty cool, right? That's then going to be built onto this A2 hub, which is non-disc to match the fork and further concrete my brake of choice to just rim brakes. I ended up trying to polish this up, and this is the best I could get in the 40 seconds I had spare. Once wired up, I have a very silver wheel indeed. I could maybe get away with normal rim tape, but even though it might be hard to see, I made a shiny one to match the rear anyway. Some stripped Echo hub bolts and caps finish it off nicely. The front tyre couldn't be further apart from the rear. Well, I guess it could have had a longer wheelbase. It's a 2-inch V The National model, which is small and light. I hope the name gives good luck, because I've never tried this tyre before, and my first proper ride is going to be at the National this weekend. Still no tubeless, and the cute thief only provided a 24-inch tube. I can only assume as some kind of sick joke. But the joke's on him. Rubber can stretch. Despite some disappointment, the cute thief didn't manage to find some silver or at least white or grey tyres. I do think the bike looks interesting though. Before I move on, I decide to trim the rear tyre. This does two things. It makes this video longer and uses up my blades. It also reduces some weight and gives more space between the tread to hook up on obstacles. No joke, I've only made it up stuff in the past due to a corner of a rock or wall slotting in between the cut tread and then catching on the remaining one. Think of it like a coarse saw gripping some wood rather than a fine saw sliding over it. Right, arse bearing time. The cute thief is obviously trying to cut weight down by providing this titanium model. It's unfortunately named an ISIS style, so now the CIA is watching us all. But I guess they were doing that anyway, so no big deal. A retro bike needs some retro cranks, and looky at these, very nice race face turbines. I could go into detail as to why they're cool, but let's face it, they're silver, and that's cool enough. I just gave them a little buff, and look at them shine. Look at them shine, ooh, look at them shine. I of course need a guard for all the bashing I'll be doing, and this Mr. Susan model is also silver, so on it goes. I just need to make sure to keep my legs well clear of it. I used silver bolts and chainring, 22 tooth if you're interested, and polished up some crank bolts to match. Time to give the hub its grill, with a silver single speed kit and 18 tooth sprocket. Before I put the wheel back in, I want to show you this that I made. Any guesses to what it is and does? While you're all down in the comments giving me your answer and also leaving a like, I'll show you a chain. Here it is. This will allow me to transfer my crank rotation into wheel rotation at a gobsmacking 2005% efficiency. To tame all this free energy, I need to fit a tensioner. This is a Tratec tensioner and they work really well. This one's skin fell off after a bath in the sodium hydroxide, and then 2 CNC jockey wheels jumped on to turn it completely silver. Alloy jockey wheels aren't the quietest, but I think this will be drowned out by my brakes, so I don't mind. Speaking of brakes, these Shimano DX stopperoos are a time saver as they're already pretty shiny. I'm kind of polished out now anyway, so I'm pretty relieved. Going for no booster, but I do have one now fit if needed. Brake pads are the T&N V-brake backings, which are the best backings out from my experience. They're stiff, but also have a concave washer built in, which makes them slimmer than most pads. Handy if clearance is tight. The pad material is one I sourced and cut myself. Check out my video on how to make your own pads for more info. Like I mentioned way back, the front brake is also a rim brake, and in this case I have matching DX V-brakes front and rear. Now the Leveronis wouldn't have been my first choice, but I can see why they're here. Shimano LX have Marmite looks and feel, but they are pretty silver. One cool feature they have is an adjustable leverage ratio, although it's not tool free like my favourite V-brake lever, the Avid ST7. The cables are very cool though. Alligator alloy segmented style and very silver. Because it's made of aluminium and not a coiled steel wire, it's both very light and doesn't compress, the latter being important for a stiff and powerful brake. Being honest, I've had mixed results from this type of cable in the past. I've had smoother results from other brands, plus with how light I set up my spring tension, it can mean the individual segments float as they're able to slide over each other slightly. This means sometimes as I pull the brakes, before the arms move, all the segments have to make contact with each other first, which causes a delay and doesn't feel great. The other thing is these cables are extremely floppy, which can be a good thing if you need tight turns, but can be noisy unless secured well. Now securing cables is something Giant have done well with their cable clamp design. They wrap around the cable, meaning you can use a hose without needing any adapters. They're also mirrored on each side of the frame, so let you choose the best route. Very nice. There's still some floppiness though, and even though the colour, or lack of it, is perfect, I resort back to my favourite cable if I don't get on with it. Now that I've spent far too much time talking about the exciting world of brake cables, let's talk about the gripping world of bar gloves. Rubber doesn't seem to come in silver, so the next best option is clear, like we have here, mid-ear. Against all logic, GT85 seems to be a great way to apply push-on grips, but they're not impervious to wet weather, and having had some grips hate life when I drove with my bike on the roof in heavy rain, I'm using some B-wire to wire them on. This is common in the crazy world of motor double unicycles, and by wrapping and twisting the ends creates a hopefully watertight seal and maintains their grip on the bar. Now that I've got somewhere for my front paws to grip, let's fit these DMR V12 pedals for my lower paws. I was tempted to polish them up, but then I thought making something I'm supposed to grip to slippery was a bad idea, so I'm leaving them as is. They're not as pimp as my pinned pedals on my Hex, but they do fit the era of the bike, and that's got to mean something. Okay, pretty much done, but near the start of the video I mentioned how it can either run a seat or no seat, and wondered what the cat had in store for me. Well, feast your eyes on this. Oi, stop laughing. This thing's a gem. It's a cut down kid BMX race seat, and is in between running a seat and being seatless. These were all the rage in the 2000s before bike designs got extreme and took away any option of having a seat at all. It's small, very light, and was better than having an exposed seat tube. You simply shave down the plastic until it was a nice push fit. Now they're funny looking, and I always used to get comments on the streets, but I think they look cool and suits this frame well. Well, that's the most polishing I've done in a long time. Let's take it outside and see how it feels. Well, it feels retro. The BB feels super low, which I don't mind, but the main struggle I'm instantly noticing is the hub engagement points. I'm used to almost instant engagements, so going down to, well, I'm not even sure, might even be 48 points. That'll take some getting used to. The other thing I'm noticing is the sheer weight of the rear wheel. Winding it up for rear wheel gaps takes more effort, and the tyre grips so well, micro movements and twists are noticeably harder. I think I could get used to it, but I'm also tempted to lighten it up a little. I'm not sure yet. So there we go, the most silver bike I've ever built. What do you think? I'm sure it will split some opinions, but other than some tedious moments, it's been a fun build, and I got to show you some old school methods we used to employ back in the day. I'm entering this week's comp on it. I'm not expecting a win, which is why I didn't build a gold bike, but who knows, maybe I'll get silver. Please let me know what you thought of this build. Did you have one of these giants? Do you still have one? What would you have done differently? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back next week, hopefully with the comp video to let you know how I got on. Have an absolutely amazing week everyone, and I'll catch you next time. Take care, bye bye.